that South Sydney coach Jason Demetriou has 80 minutes to save his coaching career. The report goes on to say Ben Hornby is ready to take over as caretaker coach, and the club is also looking at bringing back John Morris from the West Tigers. Corey, if we're talking about a caretaker coach after 5 rounds of footy, is this a club in crisis?
Oh, without doubt. There's been a lot of eyeballs on South Sydney to start this season based on their roster and where they finished last year. And the fact that now they've only had 1 win out of their last 5 starts. And this story's just been broken about he has 80 minutes to save his career as a coach at the South Sydney Rabbitohs is an enormous story, and it'll continue all week. There's word that Hornby will take over as caretaker. Morris will be poached to come across, and then obviously the long term or the short term, which way you look at it, Bennett doesn't have a job next year. Will he go to South Sydney? And then obviously Burgess is up over in the UK, may return. So it's a developing story, but one that I suppose, based on their form from what we've seen, Mick, 1 win out of their last 5. It was against the Bulldogs, and to be fair, if the Bulldogs had another 10 minutes to play, they might go on and win that game. It just has been a club over the summer that everyone's looked at, and they haven't simply aimed up.
It was a catastrophic fall, wasn't it, last year after losing the competition, and then to see an iconic member of their club, not just their coaching staff, walk out, Sam Burgess, left a lot of question marks around what was actually going wrong at South Sydney, and Jason Demetriou and his star-studded roster were going to have to get out of the blocks to quieten the noise. They haven't done that. 162 points conceded suggests you tell the character of the side and just where things are at through their defence and the way they start their year. And it's not there for South Sydney at the moment. And obviously Latrell Mitchell, the suspension to him just makes matters worse. Latrell Mitchell this morning or yesterday gets a 3-week suspension. He's lucky he didn't get more. It was a blatant elbow to the jaw of Sean Johnson. And his actions, Latrell's at a situation now where he's such a big figure at South Sydney. He's such an important person in their roster and influential in so many areas of not only their performance but their footy club. It's time for Latrell to go away and have a think about how his actions are affecting his teammates. It's a chance for South Sydney to reset. It's a chance for Jason Demetriou, whose coaching role is on the line, to make some wholesale changes. I'd be bringing Jack Whiten into 5'8", moving Cody Walker to halfback. They have to do that. Got to get Jack Whiten closer to the footy.
Mick, the fact that he's got 80 minutes is so the story breaks. 80 minutes to save his career would just suggest that if they go on and win this weekend but lose the next 3, like the days are numbered, is it not? Like you would think that if you're Jason Demetriou and you read this headline, generally where there's smoke there's fire, and he has 80 minutes to save his career, that his days are done.
Well, realistically, Corey, they should be 0-5. They
correct.
Beaten by the Dogs. The Dogs just simply didn't have the attack like they did the other night. But had they have played the way they did against the Roosters, or been able to even half execute the way they did against the Roosters in that first half, we're talking about South Sydney not winning a game this season. I'm with you, Corey. I think it's hard to see how this turns around.
Is this the fair response, though, given we are in the season?
Well, the fact it's not the 5 weeks, Hannah. It's the back end of last year. It's the amplified summer and spotlight after Sam Burgess walked out. John Morris, who was a big part of their coaching staff, departed or announced his departure only 24 to 48 hours later to the West Tigers, and is doing their defence, and you can see the impact that he's had there. So it's not just the opening 5 weeks. It's the fact from mid-season last year that there has been an astronomical fall for South Sydney, and with a roster that has Damien Cook, Cameron Murray, Latrell Mitchell, Cody Walker, Totola, Burgess, Arrow, Jack Whiten. Like, these are players that, you just mentioned the Titans. Like, Christ, Des Hasler would love to have those blokes on the field this afternoon. And simply just not getting a response from them. And that, at the end of the day, whether the players, you can sit and criticise them, but where the game's at the moment, it's based on results. And often it's not the players that go, it's the coach. And I'm with Corey. I think regardless of what happens in the next 80 minutes, whether it's next week or in the coming weeks, it looks like Jason's time is up at South, and the fact that they run into Cronulla next week now without Latrell Mitchell, who can score points, Cronulla, and can score them very quickly, and they're coming off a bye. They'll be fresh. They then have a bye and run into Penrith and the Melbourne Storm in the following weeks. So doesn't get any easier for South Sydney.
It goes from bad to worse. You touched on Latrell Mitchell's suspension, the match review committee charging him with the Grade 2 dangerous conduct charge. Given, gents, it's his 3rd and subsequent offence, he's looking at minimum 3 weeks on the sideline. South's a anchored to the bottom of the ladder, it feels, at the moment, Corey. Are they in free fall now?
Well, this is part and parcel of the problem that they have at South at the moment. I mean, Latrell Mitchell, as Mick touched on there before, one of their most influential players, if not their most influential player within their side, but doesn't have, well, it appears by the evidence that he's shown, doesn't have what the team needs, and that's a team-first mentality. Since 2021, Latrell Mitchell's had 14 weeks on the sideline. Some of those just with some dumb acts, some selfish acts that don't need to be had. And that one that we just saw there against Sean Johnson yesterday, it just didn't need to be done. He's got one of the strongest fends in the game. Did not need to raise the elbow. He knew straight away when he made contact with the jaw of Johnson, and he grabbed his head and said sorry. They're little acts that when you add them up, it has an impact on the side. Now, the biggest impact is not having one of your star players, being able to run out there, with their teammates and have an influence on the game. But for me, Latrell Mitchell, and Mick, you touched on it, needs to have a look at where he wants to be seen as a player. We love Latrell Mitchell. The game is a better game when Latrell Mitchell is playing really well. But there comes periods of time where you just scratch your head and you just think that is just an act that does not need to happen. And the people that pay the price the most are his teammates.
Can you help me understand how behaviour like that from Latrell influences and impacts the relationship you have with your teammates, Cos?
Well, it influences in the sense that you go out there, you train all week, you train all summer, you have these periods in place of what you want to try and achieve in a game, and then it just through a brain snap, through someone not thinking, through somebody putting themselves before the team, comes up with an act like that, and everyone, the ramifications are huge because everyone has to pay the price. 14 weeks he's spent.
You don't always get it right on the footy field.
You don't always get it, but that there,
at the end of the
Michael,
day, where Latrell's at the moment, and I said he needs to go away over these next 3 weeks and have a real think about his ramifications with his actions on the team. That doesn't mean that he goes to Taree for 3 weeks. No, it cannot happen. So what Latrell Mitchell needs to do and what Jason Demetriou needs to do when he talks about his leadership at the club, he needs to say to Latrell Mitchell, and Latrell Mitchell needs to come in and he needs to be at training every single morning at 6 a.m. before any other players get there, and he needs to actually dive in and show his teammates and the club what he's going to do then on return. Like that is the key, because Latrell is such a big part of this footy club, and he needs to send a message. And this is an opportunity now with 3 weeks out of the game, not to step back and retract from the club and have a break. It's about diving in. And Corey mentioned team first actions. Get there every single morning, train your backside off for the next 3 weeks and show your teammates that this season's still alive and he's going to play a big part in that.
Do you believe the season's alive for the Rabbitohs, Cos?
Well, it's still long enough to play left of the season.
Well, are they good enough to go and beat Cronulla and Melbourne and Penrith?
Absolutely.
No,
absolutely, they are.
They are.
But what we've seen, the evidence we've seen so far, you'd say no. Based on the back end of last year, based on what we've seen this year, the points that they're conceding at the moment are just diabolical. Yeah. Which then suggests that there's a huge internal rift, because you can't turn up to a game and be proud of your own performance if you're leaking that many points. No. That comes down to attitude. You hear it so often. Attitude, defence is an attitude, and that is one part of their game they do not have right. But just to touch on what you said there, Mick, I agree 100% with what you're saying with Latrell and his actions. If they weren't habits that he's been doing in years previous or even this year, why all of a sudden, who's going to be the one to say to Latrell, this is what you need to do? JD's got potentially 80 minutes to go before he's got on the chopping block. Is that part of the problem? I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
As a marquee player, when your coach is under pressure, and you've been suspended for 3 weeks, you've got no other option. You've got no other option than to show your teammates, your coaching staff, and your fans and members that the season's still alive and you're going to play a big part in it. And that's the position that Latrell's put himself in at the moment. And I said before, he's lucky it's only 3 weeks. But it's a deeper problem at South at the moment, and that's why the headlines are what they are. And Phil's obviously reported what he's reported this afternoon, because it's not just the elbow from Latrell Mitchell that's put the coach on notice. It's been something that's been unfolding and bubbling and seeping away for the last 6 or 8 months at South Sydney. There's something not right there at the moment. You cannot simply have this roster and be sitting in last position and conceded 162 points. You can't.
Agree.